I say.
We can't change anyone, but actually we can support people and encourage them to be able to help bring change for themselves.
Hi, welcome back to Derbados Inn. Today we have someone with us that it's all over the place. He's a husband, a senior manager, and we want to know everything about what Paul Brookhouse is doing around the city. Paul, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us today here in our chat, in our gathering, elation, as I can call it.
In our mess. It's a little bit of a mess, isn't it?
So, Paul, would you like to tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so I originally grew up in the north of England in a little town called Richmond, which had a population of about 15,000 people. And I lived there till I was 18 and then moved to Birmingham, which was like the complete opposite in terms of spectrum. Where I grew up as a child, anyone outside that town was almost seen as someone from another country, even the next village. And then go to Birmingham, which was the second most multicultural cities in the country. Mm-hmm. It was a big change. And so growing up as a child, I always wanted to work in a bank because I was good with numbers. And I set myself on working for a bank. And at the age of 18, as we moved, a bank was going to take me on, and they wanted me to go back to the north of England, and I didn't want to go. So I was like, what do I do? And so I had a year out. Okay. And that's how I ended up in Derby. No really kind of spiritual reason. It was my dad had an accident, and when we lived in Birmingham, it was the easiest way to get home because he was in and out of hospital all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I came to Derby and spent a year doing youth work in, at the time, one of the most 50 deprived estates in the country. And I got into the whole youth work thing and with the church and felt that is what I was called to at the time. Went back to Birmingham, did youth work, but it's not as friendly as Yorkshire. And so I decided in 2002 to come back to Derby. And yeah, the rest is kind of history, so to speak.
So, the first thing you did here when you got here was like youth work. Was it that related to any church?
Yeah, so the year was placed with actually what is now called REACH. At the time, it was East Midlands Christian Fellowship. Yeah. And so we were based in Allington, and we were working there. And then it became a registered charity in its own right. So when I came back in 2002, I worked with them for 10 years. And was involved in doing a lot around trying to help young people stay out of crime, and mentoring the support. And we were nationally recognised as one of the best projects in the country. Mm-hmm. Wow. And it's probably during that time you saw a lot of poverty in people's families, but it wasn't your primary reason you're working with people, and you didn't really have time to try and address the deprivation and poverty faced because you were dealing with so much. And I think it was the start of the journey that God took me on to be where I am now.
So Paul, and today he's the senior manager of Food for, I'm going to try to say it correctly, Food for Thought. Food for Thought Alliance. There we go. That's my pronunciation day. I'm stopping here. Don't try to make me spell anything correctly today. I'm sorry. Anyways, Paul Paul is the senior manager of Food for Thought Alliance. As he does with all the people that work in his project, a big work in the city, especially with food banks. But we're gonna get to know him more. We're gonna ask more questions. Paul, actually, I met Paul in 2017. He was the manager of the food bank in the Hope Center, in the city center. And I think when I came back to Derby, you have left, and you during COVID you started Food for Thought Alliance. So can you tell us more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So at the time that COVID hit, I was self-employed, and I got contacted by the local authority, the council, as they set up this what they called community hub model, which was about how to support people with anything during COVID, whether it's a need for prescriptions, whether it's they're struggling in the anxiety and the mental health, through to the food side. And so they asked me to be part of the coordination of that side, and having ran, as you mentioned, the Hope Centre, where people came to and said, we like coming to you because we get a good food parcel. I always had in my head, what does that mean if you go somewhere else? You get different. And for me, wherever you live in the city, you should get the same offer. So if you live in Simfin or you live in Mackworth or Chellaston or Allestree, your needs are still the same, and we shouldn't deliver different models. And so I was asked to help coordinate the response. At first, in COVID, it was all chaos. It was just make sure nobody goes hungry, deal with all the chaos and people's panic over taking food and all the things that went on. But as soon as we kind of got through those first 6 months, I was already thinking, how do we change how we work with people? And my biggest frustration is food has become the sticky plaster. That people think that food is the answer. And actually my desire, my heart was, let's stop talking about food and actually let's talk about people. You know, it's the fundamental principle, you know, of the gospel. You know, Jesus met the emergency need, but actually he was more focused on the individual and their deeper needs. And for me, that's what it was about, because food isn't the answer. It's a consequence of something else. And we have to make sure that actually we support people, or all we do is keep them in the trap. And so my aim was, let's look at how we change things. So Food for Thought is all about coordinating the response. We don't deliver any projects. We're about making sure that wherever you are in the city, you get the immediate support you need, but then, okay, let's make sure they get that deeper, wide, you know, more complex, you know, support they need to make sure that actually they can get out of, you know, the poverty. And so our strapline is simple. People think about food, but actually you need to think about support, and then you need to think about change.
Okay.
You know, and it's not about we change people, because that's too arrogant. We can't change anything. We can't change anyone. But actually we can support people and encourage them to be able to help bring change for themselves in partnership with us. And that's what we try and do.
Is just trying to understand, because you said at the beginning the authorities, they contact you to start something.
Yeah.
So today, Food for Thought is something, it's like a project from the authorities, or it's like a charity. Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah.
For
So
us?
when it first started out, it was almost like, if you asked who I was employed by, I was like seconded into a project that wasn't officially ran by one person. And so the first few months it was like that. I was actually doing some self-employed work with, you know, Aussie Road Church at the time. And so they actually seconded me into the project because it was the easiest way so I could get paid. And then after a few months, I then became part of what's Community Action Derby, which is an infrastructure organisation to facilitate things in the city. And I was based in there. And our project, as we evolved and developed it, stayed in Community Action because it was the easiest way to try and manage everything. But we recognise we need to become independent, not for any other reason other than really funding and trying to bring more resource into the city to help. And so last year we registered as a form of charity that's called a CIO, and then fully went independent April this year.
Wow. Wow. And do you still partner with the council?
Yeah, so we partner with, you know, we've always worked closely with the council on this. We're still based in Community Action's offices. You know, we partner with businesses, the faith sector. I think what COVID taught us more than anything, we all knew that the best way to work is everybody working together. But the problem is every sector likes to work individually. And even within the voluntary sector, lots of projects like to work on their own. You know, my frustration, having grown up in church all my life, is the lack of partnership there is amongst churches working together. And actually, you know, the strapline of the council, and it's a little bit cheesy, but it's true, is we're better together. And it's true. You know, the Bible talks about unity. And actually, where we work together collectively, we can do more than we can when we work on our own. And so we're part of the response still, but we take the focus, you know, on our own in terms of the food side.
So in a practical level then, how does it work? Like, so let's say there is a family that is needing help, you know, like with food and everything. Does the council contact you guys, or the family goes straight to you guys? How does this connection work?
So there's different ways. It's someone can call on behalf of a family or an individual if they, you know, not confident to do it themselves for different reasons. Language can be one of those barriers that people face. So they can be referred via an agency, or they can contact us direct. They can ring, they can email, they can Facebook, Twitter, everything, you know, that people can make contact with. And we have 3 simple questions that we ask, and we expand on these questions. But our principle is, how can you help yourself?
Okay.
How can family or friends or your community help you? And what would you like us to help you with? Not what would you like us to do for you, it's what would you like us to help you with? And we go through that process because we have this principle to help people long term. We say that people have to be engaged. And everybody wants me to define what engagement is and put it in a paragraph, and I will never do that. Because engagement can be different for different people. So if you're struggling with your mental health and can't leave the house that day, to send a text to say, look, I just can't cope today, can we rearrange? That is engagement for me. To the DWP, that would seen as non-engagement, and they potentially would sanction you and your benefits. But for me, the person's communicating, and when you're dealing with trauma or difficult situations, sometimes you just cannot process things. You cannot work in the way the systems want you to. So that's why I use the term engagement, because engagement isn't a one-off, it's a long-term journey. And so people come through that way. We look at meeting the immediate need, and then, okay, to support you longer, let's look at what's really going on and how we can help you to help yourself. And that is the challenging part of it for lots of reasons.
So what will be like the main things you can support someone long term? Of course, like we mentioned about food. What will be the other extras?
So there's always a reason people come through that's beyond the food. And so a big thing at the moment is people's finances, which is a real challenge in the cost of living. Many people are getting into debt, some through life choices that maybe weren't the best, but many through just their finances don't meet their needs. And we're seeing a huge increase in working families accessing us. So where somebody is working in the household, but their money just doesn't stretch. And so it's about looking at, is there a way we can help people around their management of their finances? Is there debt issues which they need support to? Naturally, we'll refer them to Derby City Mission mainly, because they have the Great Jubilee Project to support them. Lots of people, housing is in dire straits at the moment. It's in the worst situation it's been for 40 years. And give everyone a little bit of a history thing that might not know, back in the 70s, the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher came up with the idea of people being able to buy their council houses, which in principle was a good idea. The problem was the stock was never replaced. So people are buying their houses, and then that means there's less and less social housing available. And over 40 years, an acceleration of COVID, we are now in the crisis where I think Derby has 5,000 to 6,000 people on the housing register, and on an average there is maximum maybe 400 properties available. So you look at the issue, it's huge. So many people are in temporary accommodation, bed and breakfast, hotels, places where they can't cook. But when they do get a house, people have to make a choice. Do they buy themselves a washing machine, or do they feed their kids? Do they paint the walls, or do they eat? These challenges that people face because they don't have the resource to buy, and there is help available there. Often people don't know, and so we support them with the food whilst those bits get supported. You also have situations, people fleeing very difficult situations, domestic violence. There can be, natural tragedies happened. We had a situation recently, and I won't go into all the details, but where basically a working man with his son had worked all his life, house was on fire, he was severely burnt, and because he was in hospital, he lost his job, so he lost everything. All he had was one bag of clothes, and was now in house, so he was in complete, mess. And so it's the perception people have is why people access food. It's a lot deeper. The prison system, often they release people out of prison on a Friday afternoon. When they can't access the benefits should be sorted out before they leave. Often it's not. They can't access the housing stuff. They can't access and then people have no money to be able to buy food, or the system is broken in so many places. And so the reasons are very varied. And then you've got the area around once people get refugee status, people in the asylum system. So many reasons that people have. We could tell you so many stories that range why people end up in difficult, challenging situations. And one of the other ones is around the cost of electricity. So if you have a disability, So we've had situations where people are having to charge their mobility scooters, so they're not isolated, so it's costing them more electricity, and then because of the higher prices, they can't afford to eat. You know, there's a lot of complicated situations that just lead to people coming through. And of course, there's some individuals who make life choices that aren't necessarily the wisest and get themselves into a mess. But there's always a story behind that situation. And our principle is we have to treat people as a human being, not a number or a caseload. And that often the system, because it's in crisis, treats people just as another client or another number, when there's a face and a story behind the situation, and we have to recognise that.
You briefly mentioned like that some people in like they needed for example when they have like debt issues you kind of forward them to DCM for the opposite emission. So that brings another question, like, so you guys are working with some partnerships around the city then?
Yeah, so in terms of, so we work with 13 food banks in the city.
Okay.
Now in there, my aim is, you know, I make this clear and I say this all the time, every food bank needs to close. The model of a traditional sense of a food bank is no longer the way to help people. You know, and having helped set up, you know, the Hope Centre, and the Hope Centre's changed its model. You came to us and said you're in need, we would say, here's a bag of food. You have no say what goes in the food. You know, you have no, you know, choice, that the dignity isn't there. And also, you might not like half the items in there. So actually you could waste some of those items. Yeah. So for me, the model has to change where we give people choice what goes in within parameters, and you know, it's probably too complicated to explain how we're changing, but we're trying to move to the model of community shops. So we have the food banks, and then we also have the community meal projects where actually people come for food, but there's a lot of other things they get supported with. Everywhere now is calling them these warm hubs or warm spaces or warm welcomes, but the principle's always been the same. You know, the food is a way of drawing people in to actually help with loneliness, with the isolation and deeper issues, and be able to support that around. And that's, so we probably partner with 40 to 50 projects.
Wow.
And each month we retail value the actual, if it was sold in the shop, we give away the equivalent of £80,000 worth of food a month.
Do you actually also support the asylum seekers and refugees?
Yeah.
In this?
So we work with two of the projects. We work with one of the food banks is specifically for asylum seekers, refugees, and then there's upbeat communities, you know, which are supporting asylum seekers and refugees, and we support them with some bits around food also.
That's really, really nice. It's very interesting, like, because somehow it's nice to see how the charities in Derby, how they are connected. You know, it's nice to see how everyone is working together for the good of the city. And I do believe it's something that some of the population, they have no idea that actually there's all this good work that's being done behind the scenes. We went to the streets and we asked people, like, what's the problems that you see in the city? And most people say homelessness and homelessness, is it correct? Homelessness. And like one of the person one of the people we spoke to, she said, why is the government doing nothing about these people? Like she said, it's not about them, but what they're doing nothing. And people say, there's so many empty buildings. So there's like we see people asking, like, it was interesting to see people's questions, you know, but also I feel like by being there and talking to people, I felt challenged to challenge, because sometimes we see the problems around us, but what do we do to actually see things changing? And as you said, food, like the food banks, they are changing the model. I was reading another day that one food bank in London closed because the person who was leading it, she said, just give food to people is just not answer. And so there is more to it. Like for example, you see, like you said, there's food is like a result of something else. Is there something as citizens that we can actually do to like work in the roots of that?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things. I think the first thing I will say is every individual has a story, you know, and I think the problem with society is we think people just need to change just like that. You know, grown up in church all my life, you know. You look at the smoking side, and when growing up as a child, when people became a Christian, and the arguments were, now you're a Christian, stop smoking straight away. And I was brought up in that, and so I, you know, okay, yeah, they just need to stop. But actually, things aren't that simple. You can't just fix something overnight, you know, and things need to be worked on. And so the first thing that people need to do is to be able to trust somebody. You know, you come to me with an issue, you know, you're not going to tell me everything because you don't know who I am. Why should you trust me that actually I'm there to help you? You know, especially if the system has failed you many times, you're like, you don't want to almost believe that something can change, so you naturally reject people. Often people's behaviours is to actually keep people distant because they don't want people to get close because of shame, of the guilt, of the dignity, of the embarrassment, all the emotions and the disappointment. And so I think there's different things. What people need more than anything is to know that somebody cares, that somebody's interested in them. The most interesting thing ever said to me at the Hope Centre, and it always stuck to me, a younger girl and an older gentleman came in, and they said, the problem is people only talk to us about our problems. They actually don't ask us what we're interested in, what we like to do, what's happened in our day. They only talk to us about what's wrong. And I thought that was really interesting, that actually that is, if you're in chaos or trauma or difficulty, a lot of people's interaction is around their problem, not in them as an individual. And I just thought that is so important that we have to recognise there's more to a person than what's going on in life. And so there's that support, the relationship side. Naturally, people can give of their time volunteering. They can give of their time actually by doing something practically, you know, donating within the church circles. We need more people to pray. You know, I've realised I turned 49 in August. I know I still look young. I turned 49.
I love this confidence.
30 years I've been working in communities. And the reality is, we can put on the best programs in the world, we can do everything possible, but actually, in some situations, in a lot of situations, unless actually people see the true essence of what the gospel is about, their life doesn't ever change. You know, and I think we have to recognise that. I've come up with my new principle, and during COVID I came up with the principle of the 4 S's, of the 3 things we can do and the 1 thing that we can't do. And the 3 things we can do, you know, we can support people, you know, we can signpost, and we can make suggestions. The problem is we tell people what to do, and actually we need to make suggestions. You know, you've got these different options, you've got to choose which one's best for you. Even if we don't like the choice, it's their choice. But the 4th thing, especially as Christians, you know, we fail at often, is we think we can save people from their situations. But actually there's only God who can save people from situations. You know, we can't. And the day that we get caught up with that is the day that we carry the burden and probably make ourselves not very well and get stressed and don't do so good. And so people can give of their time, they can give of their resource, and they can pray and believe. And we need to campaign. The church has lost its arm of campaigning in my view. We don't speak up enough, sometimes because we're fearful of the responses. So as a city at the minute, a lot of that I'm talking about is around child poverty. What has happened to the Make Poverty History campaign? What has happened to any of this stuff? You don't hear anything. I don't hear anything on the news. I look on the internet, it seems to have disappeared. And we can't do anything about the world or national, but we can do something here in the city. It's not just about money, it's not just about, you know, buildings, it's actually about time is the biggest thing that we can give to society.
I thought very interesting that you mentioned about like people feeling a bit like not trusting and feeling a bit like, you know, and I think it's a reality, you know, like when people when the government fail and when the government fail on people, it creates that kind of fear of, you know what, they don't care. They're just looking for their own agenda, and it can sound a bit daunting for them, innit? Like in the sense of even actually to ask for help, because it creates that fake sense of they put me in the situation. Why would I ask for help for the ones that actually cause all these issues? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting that you're providing this safe space, because it breaks that stigma, you know, like it breaks that idea that they can't ask for help. you know. I think that very, very interesting. That really was a highlight for me because, I mean, I've seen many people out there. I think even, I mean, we had a funny situation whilst we were on the streets with the homeless men. It was interesting. That's what I'm gonna say. It was interesting, and you see that his frustration. He's saying that he used to be. I mean, of course, he was a bit high, I can say, but he's saying that he was a businessman, and he lost it all, and he's on the streets like that. And you see how he talks about the government and like how, to a certain extent, he feels disgusted by it because he blames the government for where he ended up. And it doesn't seem like he can see a way that he could go back to the government for asking for help because in his mind, the government did that to him. And so put him in that cycle, like, the government did that to him, therefore I can't actually go and ask for help. So having a third place to go in this, it's like so good because then they say that they're not actually, well, you guys are related to the government, but you know what I mean, like not directly related to the government, and that can give like a sense of security to people, you know. So I find that very interesting, you know, for people that actually struggle to trust in the government and to trust in the place to find help, being able to find someone that is not actually directly related to the government can be a help because it can help people to open up.
Yeah, I actually had like we spoke with Denise from the Hope Center. She's in one of the episodes. And it's like the same thing about like how can we actually help? Like how can we actually support people the best way we can? And I actually had the opportunity to sit and signpost some people the last couple of weeks, and it's very interesting. Like I say to Kyle, I am a bit confrontational. Is it the correct? I like to confront. I like to kind of encourage people to say, like, how can we change this? Yeah. But I also like to know, like, so I got a girl and I could like say, what do you love? What's your passion in life? Because sometimes people they are so like, on this way, they don't think about, there's so many things going on that they don't think about what they really love, and maybe finding something that they love, and some people that encourage them to think about things that they can love and they can actually pursue. And maybe it's like, that's one of my thoughts. I was thinking after talking to her, maybe it's some of the things it's a way to support people, isn't it? Like to encourage them to look for something else it's going to go out of this cycle that they've been through. Because what I've noticed is it's like a cycle. They come to this, then they come to that, and then they end up in the same place. Yeah. And it's like a family sometimes. Yeah. It passes to the it's from the mom that passes to the daughter, and it's a cycle in the family that never ends. So it's like a culture. And in the family, it's a culture. So I don't know, I just think how, in my head, I keep asking myself, how can we actually do something? Like, should we have like more spaces where people can talk? Do they actually think that the mental health places that they are actually, because lots of people, the problems are mental health. Do they actually think they get the support that they need? You know what I mean? Like, do they have actually a place that they can actually talk and put everything? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's some of the things that I've been thinking.
So probably three things, that I would say. Going back to my youth work days, what you realise, if we don't support people when they're young, by the time they become adults, the trauma they face is a lot more complicated to unwind. You speak to most homeless individuals and their story often begins when they're younger. And I think if we don't do something then, there's a challenge. I was placed in the local authority for 9 months and was working, and the story of the ones really kind of replicated in me in my journey afterwards as to why I didn't fit. And I think the local authority is set up to help the 99s. It has legal duties, it has processes, it has the big picture, which are all about individuals. what I'm called to, what the church is called to, and a lot of community projects is to look after the ones, those who can't access the system in the same way. And we have to recognise, again, if the two work together, we help the 100. We have to recognise each other's strengths. We often work with chaotic people, and whilst the local authority can help chaotic people, they're also restricted because of various processes. And so we have to complement, within that. And the third thing, that I would say around it, and I'm trying to remember slightly what the third thing was. The sporting children, the 99s and the ones. Yeah, it's the story. The story I always struggled with in the Bible, was the one, is it, Bartimaeus, what is it, Bartimaeus and Ananias, about the turned her into a pillar of salt. Is that the right people? One way it was leave your village and don't look back.
Oh, it's Lot.
Yeah, Lot, was it? Yeah, I'm
his
terrible.
wife.
Everyone's going to tell me off
Abraham
now. But
cousin.
I always struggled with why, because she turned around because she was worried about her family and the destruction that was going on, that God turned her into a pillar of salt. And I was like, that's harsh. Because any of us, if we knew we had to leave our family behind, God said leave them behind and they're all going to get destroyed, we would struggle to not look back and check they're okay. And yet that was the one thing he told them not to do. They did it, and he turned them into a pillar of salt. And what I've started to realise is the biggest problem that people have is they look at the past. Yeah. And I think the biggest plan, of the devil right now is if he's got us focused on the past, we will never have hope in the future. And I remember talking to one young person when I was in the YMCA, and he said to me, "It's all right for you, your life's easy." And I said to him, "Mate, you know nothing about my life." And I told him a bit of family and stuff that had gone on. And he was like, "But why is it you're okay?" I goes, "I didn't say I was okay. I said, but what I do is I focus on the things that I can and not on the stuff that I can't change. And that's your problem." And I was strong with him. It was a strong conversation, and probably the bluntest I've ever been with someone I was with him. And he came back to me a few weeks later, and he was like, "You're right. I'm so consumed with what's happened in my life and blaming people and getting caught up on it, I actually don't think, what can I do in my future?" And that's the problem we see with so many people. So many things that are going on, in their minds, especially at night time, getting isolated, so consumed with life that actually we lose the fact that God promises, that we can have a future, that actually he'll do good and he won't harm us. And all the different promises there are, we lose sight of because of stuff. It's not to say that trauma doesn't happen and we don't get a whole host of emotions and we don't have our moments and fall down, but the key issue is if we stay a victim forever, then we'll never have a future. And it's not that we haven't been a victim of that, it's that mentality of I can never achieve, I'm not worth anything, I'm no good, I'm a waste of space, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that, people will always mistreat me. If we start to believe all these messages, then we live them out all the time. And we have to actually believe if we're created in the image of God, then my life has a purpose and I have a future, and actually I can do something with my life in spite of all this rubbish that is there. And that's where we have to help people more than anything to see there is hope. Right now, during the cost of living, we can't change a lot of things, but if the church isn't the message of hope today, then we might as well just give up and just have an easy life, because what is the gospel if it's not a message of hope that actually, yes, things are not good, but there is actually a God who's above all this, who brings hope and brings a future. And for me, that's the biggest thing. That isn't about a job. It's not something we can fix. It's actually something we speak into, people's lives. And I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is about Aslan the lion.
Yeah.
If you've not seen it, have you seen it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a moment in there where the witch, turns all the people into stone. So they're alive, but behind the stone. And Aslan comes and he breathes on them. And they, the stone goes and they're, back to life. And
Spoiler
actually,
alert.
that is what the essence of it is about. That's what it's about, the gospel. Bringing life into the dry bones where it seems like things are dead. And that's what is more than just doing good. It's bringing that message and believing that actually if God is who he says he is, God still changes lives. He still sets people free. He can release people from mental health. He can heal people. He can give people opportunities. He feeds the hungry. He clothes the naked. He puts people in lives of the widows. And we have to believe that that's what the message of the gospel is about, and live it in spite of, the walking with a limp, and the damage that sometimes we see in life. And fundamentally, whilst my organisation isn't a Christian organisation, so to speak, while I'm in charge, the very essence of it will always be that message of hope, that in spite of your current circumstances, you still have a future. And that's what we've got to bring.
I think that's the way we've been talking a lot about changing the atmosphere of the city, and I think that's the way, even speaking with people, sometimes as church or as Christians, you're so focused maybe in get people saved, as you said. But we forget to say to people that they are created in the image of God and how valuable they are, because they don't know that. Yeah. And that's something that I've noticed, during my time sign posting, is that I actually say to people, you are important. You are, to bring them the value that sometimes they don't believe, and value them for who they are. I think that's one of the, but then from that, I realized that's there is actually a need to walk alongside people, because we can to bring hope, to speak hope into people's life. It needs time, so we need to dedicate time in our lives to actually walk alongside people. How can we find people that actually will support people that go for a coffee with someone that's in milestone and is struggling and fighting there, and how do we sit with young people that they are in homeless situations? How can we support, give them that? Because it's more to that. So I've noticed sometimes they feel unworthy. Is it correct? Yeah. They feel unworthy. They feel like the self-esteem is low because of the way they look like. So sometimes they need just someone who's going to take them to a hairdresser, or someone that's going to help them with their teeth, because they so that it's kind of a practical way, I guess, of showing people that you love and you care, and that if you are saying at this end here in front of a stage, whatever platform, or in front of a video, that you care for them, actually there is more than we can do. And I know it's quite expensive to do this kind of stuff, but I think that's a good way people will actually also trust you. We are worried that sometimes people take advantage. I understand that, but it's a risk, isn't it?
There is a cost, and the biggest cost is that time and the effort. And I never forget once taking a homeless couple to Pizza Express. I was trying to think, where's the least poshest type of place that I could take them for food? And we went to Pizza Express, because I thought pizza, everyone loves pizza. And we were there, knife and fork at the table, all this. Their pizza came first, mine didn't come, and they were waiting for me. I was like, no, eat. And they were like, no, we'll wait. I get my pizza. Why am I going to use a knife and fork with the pizza? I pick up the pizza to eat. And they just took a deep breath. And I'm like, what's up? They're like, we were too embarrassed to ask if we could eat the pizza by hand and not use knife and fork. And I think we forget. And they said to me, we've never been to a restaurant. Pizza Express isn't really a restaurant, but, lots of people don't go to a coffee shop for coffee. It's not normal for them for lots of reasons. And to do those simple things and to invest that time actually shows somebody, you know what, you took time out of your day to take me somewhere and sit and actually focus on me. Makes a huge thing in building that trust. And we have to earn that right to speak into people's lives. And I think that's a massive sacrifice that actually makes a difference to so many people. And people say to me all the time, why do you do those little bits that you do? That's not your job. And I've always said the day this becomes a job will be the day that I'll quit, because I'll stop caring about people. If we don't care about people, you cannot work with people, because actually you don't see their value. And as you said about, people's self-worth, their identity, so many people have been battered down that actually they just need to hear that actually somebody believes in me. Somebody actually sees some worth in me. Somebody sees that actually there's something about me that's good. Because if you've been an individual that's grown up in chaos, imagine from a kid to an adult, your life has been chaos. all you've ever had is people talk about your issues, talk about what you're not doing well, what's going wrong, this, that and the other, and it just eats away at you to the point where you actually don't believe who God created us to be.
You know what? I have actually a very hard question. So recently we've seen that Birmingham. Well, I actually decided to ask this question because you've been involved with the government and working on that side of things. But we recently seen in the news that Birmingham declared that they were bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this is like a shock, considered like that Birmingham is the second biggest city in the UK, and we would expect that things would run smoothly and everything. I'm not sure where we are now in this list, like whether we are like close to declare that we are bankrupt as well, or if we are far from it. I wouldn't imagine that we might be in the on the edge, if you know what I mean. Like the whole country is at the moment. But if, let's say, God forbid, but if Derby declared, if the Derbyshire Council declared that they are bankrupt as well, how that can affect in this whole, food bank side of things, how that can affect this area? Because it seems like soon as a government declare that they're bankrupt, all the services that the council provides is literally the minimum because they can't afford to do any of the extras, let's say that. So how can that affect us practically if one day the Derby government say like we're bankrupt?
Yeah. So I think you may have said as a city, I think over the next 3 years, Derby has to save £46 million off of its budget. You look at for the last 10 years at least, less and less money has been going into. We had the explosion of COVID where money was like falling out of trees to do everything possible to help people, and we're in a very chaotic situation there. And I think it's the collapse of, you two will never have heard of this shop. There was a shop called Woolworths back in the day that was a bit like Wilko's. It was like the older version of a Wilko's. It was seen as the budget type of shop. Wilko's is going bust. Places are, we are in chaos. Yeah. We cannot deny the fact that things in 49, I grew up in the 70s where I knew there was a lot of things going on, but I was a kid, didn't see them. We are in the most chaotic place of my adult life in this country. And Derby is already having to limit its services. We were talking about the mental health. There is not enough resource around mental health. Yeah. There's obviously the issues around education. There's the issues around people's health. Getting a doctor's appointment. I think it's easier to find blood and a stone than it is to get a doctor sometimes. There's issues around the dentist. There's issues, so many stuff going on. You probably see that less and less the fields and the things are getting cut. The street sweepers, you see less of them because they're having to reduce the services to try and save money. But my thing is, there is still money out there. And the problem is, there are still a lot of rich businesses, multi-million, billion-pound businesses. I think, what was it the other day? Aldi's just declared their profit has gone up in the last 12 months. Things are going up. People are still making money. We have to ask for these places and sometimes demand, like tax-wise, there's got to be certain taxes on the energy stuff. It's still outrageous, the profits being made. We have to do something to bring the money back in because government just doesn't have it.
I think we're talking about crisis. One of the things I realized is when being in the food bank myself, helping, and I'm sometimes getting food too, just say. Sometimes I think when there is crisis, people start to donate less. So people that are already in struggling financially or in a difficult situation, they are the most kind of affected people. I see lots people donate, but today we need to make much more effort to encourage people to help and support than we used before, because just the sound of the crisis, sometimes some people are not so affected by it, but because of the sound of it, they choose do not help as much as they would help anymore. And then the people that are in the end of the line, they are the ones who get, like, who don't get. They are the ones who don't get the help that they need. So, sometimes I think thinking about, like, out of our comfort zones, if we have, I think that's one of the things that I think as living in as a missionary is generosity is actually add up. It's something that at the end of the day, you are more blessed by giving than by taking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like many times when I share more, sometimes it's when I have more.
Yeah.
It's when I share. And people, this is some perspectives that sometimes we need to share with people, because I feel like people if there is a problem, they're just gonna get so worried, they are just gonna get so distressed about it, that they will forget that there's lots of people that actually need help. So I think, like, for example, Birmingham, I don't know, I didn't read about, I'm not as clever as Kyle, but but I think by the sound of it, like, just being like about the crisis with electrics and gas, we can see that just by the sound of it, it affected even in the summertime. That it affected the donations and people helping during the summertime. So I feel like I don't know what I'm saying, but I just feel like it's always the people at the end of the line who will suffer the consequences. And sometimes we need to think about it, that we need to think, like, actually, before we stop anything. That's when trust comes. And that's the benefit of being a Christian. Sometimes, like, I trust in God that got my future, so because of that, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to still, even though the circumstances can tell me different, I'm going to still help other people. I'm going to still spend time. I'm going to still do this or that, because it's about the people. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know.
I remember last winter we had this elderly gentleman ring us up, and he was panicking about the gas, electricity, and we said, he said, well, I have money. He said, I know I can afford to pay bills, but I'm just worried because everything I'm hearing. And I remember at the start of COVID, Bill Johnson said this great thing, and he said, I'm speaking to everybody now with mental health related issues. You have a choice. You can listen to all that the media and everything's talking that will create more fear and more worry and affect your mental health more, or actually you can invest time into reading scripture and building the hope. He said, if you choose to listen to what people are saying in the media at this time and your mental health gets worse, then it's your fault. And it's so true. In stuff, the messages are so, if we get consumed, we get full of fear, and we have to actually find, other parts of that. And you're right around the donations. I'm not ashamed to say we just launched a campaign because we're spending £10,000 a month on food because we don't have enough. And so we're asking 100 businesses to give us £100 for 12 months. And that will give us the £10,000 a month to pay the food shortage we have to make sure nobody goes hungry. And there are still ways that we can do things. There's still things that can be done. And right at the start of winter last year, you may have seen it, I was talking about the principle of the jars of oil. That actually, God asked, well, actually, what do you have? Bring what you have, and I will actually bless it, and bring as many jars as you can, and the story is that he filled every jar until the last jar was full. And I think when you look at the story of the woman with the alabaster jar and breaking it and putting it on, using her hair to wash Jesus' feet, why did that make the most impact? Because she gave her most prized possession to Jesus to do something for him. And actually, no matter what our situations are, we can still do something for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. How can people help you? Like, practically, like, for example, do you guys need donations? Do you guys need volunteers? What is the need of Food for Thought right now?
Yeah, so we need resource, whether it's actual physical food items.
Okay.
And I want people to understand, if they can only afford to give one tin of something, that still makes a difference. Don't feel that your donation is worthless, okay, however big or small, because it makes that difference. If everyone in this city that could give one tin every week, nobody would ever go hungry in our city, ever. It's the small things make a big difference. So there's giving, whether financially or practically, Given at the time, we're desperate for volunteers
Okay.
for a whole host of reasons. We need them. During COVID, there's lots of volunteers. Now, at times, it's a struggle to get people to volunteer again, and we need that. For those, who are Christians, we need people to pray, because heaven never runs out of resource, and we need a release of resource of people's time, of the finance, and God releasing His Spirit to break through into so many people's situations, because we need to be that light of the world that that shines at this time, because there is a lot of darkness. And I don't want to sound a bit negative, but this winter is going to be more challenging than last winter, and we need to face that reality that it's going to be tough for so many reasons, especially around people's mental health and around their struggles. It is a challenging season, and we need to again push through this winter so that nobody goes hungry, nobody freezes. And my biggest prayer is that nobody commits suicide this winter.
And I think if you are a young person, especially like if you are in uni, if you are out there, you think that volunteer is just for old people. That's just not true. And a good way to understand what's going on with the city is by giving your time to help. So it's to volunteer in places, and you're going to get a wider picture of what's actually going on. And it might inspire you, as it has been inspiring me and Kyle, to actually be different, be the difference that we want to see. Because sometimes it's easy for us to say what's wrong with the city, but what we can actually do to change the atmosphere of the city. As Paul said, yes, we can pray, and it's very important. But as you are all there, sometimes we spend our time doing things that are not really good for us, so why not spend this time investing in helping other people, in supporting the community? I'm sure it's going to be very good for you, as it's for me and for all the team that we have here. We love helping people and supporting, and it has changed my life and my perspective.
Yeah, and if you're watching us through YouTube, you're going to be able to find all the links of Food for Thought. So then if you want to help, or if you want to donate, or if you want to volunteer, you're going to be able to just see their details and then get in touch with someone from the team. And we're going to get you guys linked up with Food for Thought.
And that's it, isn't it? Thank you so much, Paul, for coming.
Okay.
It was really hard to get him here. He's busy. He's such a busy man. So thank you so much for coming. It was such an inspiring conversation, and we hope that as we've been inspired, other people that will be watching will be inspired too.
Yes, thank you so much for coming, Paul,
Okay.
and separating some time to have this chat with us. Sorry for the grilling, but we need to know. We need to know. We are here because we want to know. We want all the information. And thank you that has been you that are listening, watching us, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube. We thank you for being tuned up with us, and we shall see you next week then for our next episode of
Derbados in.
See ya.
Bye.